And now joining me to discuss these potential offensive actions by Russia in the upcoming days and weeks is Gary Tabach, former Chief of Staff, NATO Military Liaison in Moscow, and Benjamin L. Schmidt, Senior Fellow, University of Pennsylvania, Kleinman Center for Energy Policy. Hello to both of you, and thank you for joining me today on Ukraine This Week.
Hello.
Great to be here.
Now, Gary, let's go ahead and start with you. We're talking about this potential upcoming Russian offensive. Russia is still not trying to order a mass mobilization. They're trying to simply make do with what they have. Based on everything that you've read lately and have seen, how do you think the Russians are going to behave in the upcoming month or two as this summer offensive gets underway?
Thank you, Dan. Well, it is traditional for the Russian or Soviet troops to make advances or to have a victory celebrations on upcoming Soviet Victory Day on the 9th of May. For the rest of the Europe and us, it's 8th of May over Germany. And so, you know, it's tradition for Stalin's birthday and so forth and so forth. So they are going to make some advances and offensive operations, as reported by the Deputy Intelligence Chief of Ukraine, Military Intelligence Chief of Ukraine. Russians are preparing very well, I think, because they're using, as you reported very accurately, they're using chemical weapons, which is very, very upsetting to me because I was part of the team and the officer in charge of overseeing construction of a chemical destruction facility in the town of Shuchi in Russia in 2000. So, and we get reports from Ukrainian soldiers that Russians are using overwhelming amount of drones, and some of the drones already have an artificial intelligence in it, so they kind of already see and pick the targets on their own. And unfortunately, many in the beginning of the war, a lot of Russians left because they didn't agree with Putin and the war, and they didn't want to be drafted. But now the reporting is that many of them are returning back to Russia because, you know, they're not being treated well in Europe or elsewhere. There are sanctions against them, the ones that actually defected, which is also strange. And the salaries are very good in Russia now, and many of them are computer scientists and intellectuals, so they're coming back. So Russians, their economy is doing well. So we need to get prepared for an an attack. And of course, the West and us, as you reported earlier, it's too little late. So hopefully it's not too late. And I can say that just one more thing, that Senator Cronin put again a bill for our Congress to approve Ленд Лиз for Ukraine. It's a second time. The first time the president didn't act on it. And on Sunday, we have a demonstration in front of the White House saying, listen, please give Ukraine Ленд Лиз, because without Ленд Лиz, all this nickeling and diming Ukraine with weapons that are outdated or they're coming in too late and not enough is really causing Ukraine to bleed very hard and puts the rest of Europe in danger, as you can see.
Certainly, certainly. It seems like many politicians have yet to make the ultimate decision of what they exactly want, and that's declaring a goal, and the goal is victory, and then give the Ukrainians the tools that they need to accomplish that. Now, Mr. Schmidt, I'd like you to chime in as well. You know, based on what we're seeing, what do you think the upcoming offensive operations by Russia will look like? And as Gary just brought up, I mean, will the aid package delivered by the United States and the United Kingdom, will the weapons make it and ammunition make it to Ukraine in time to hold the Russians off from any offensive action?
Well, look, that's a huge question. This is something I'm hearing from friends who are in the armed forces of Ukraine. They are really, really concerned that it could possibly be too little, too late. I think that we need to kind of reset our expectations here in the coming weeks, however, because we as the West, and in particular the United States, wasted 6 months of strategic time to approve the weapons package that was needed and should have been delivered back last August or September to Ukraine to keep the balance of artillery in particular, in at least to balance out or push towards Ukrainian favor. It's obviously not there right now. There's Western coalitions that are rushing these weapon systems to the front lines, but it will take time. And I think that, as Gary pointed out, there's going to be this kind of hysteresis in the system where there's going to be a push by the Russians that is going to be very ugly, frankly, in the coming weeks. But I think that the Ukrainians can stabilize if there's enough weapons packages that ultimately get there, and then again having this sort of Ленд Лиз program to make sure that there's sort of stability going forward, not allowing Russia to have these strategic or tactical wins, based solely on the fact that we in the West seem unwilling to, unfortunately, consistently and quickly support Ukraine when it is needed, not when it's politically, beneficial to politicians in the United States or in Europe. So this is something that we need to keep at top of mind at all time, to keep that stability going forward, to allow the armed forces of Ukraine to do their job and defend their citizens, and then also retake illegally occupied land that was taken all the way back starting in 2014 and of course since the February 2022 large-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
Right. The Institute for the Study of War came out recently and said that they expect that the Russians could launch offensive operations in the direction of Kharkiv and Sumy once again, right? So this, I don't know. I'm on the fence. Would they dare to do something like this? Kharkiv seems like a very well-defended city. It's a big city, and it's going to be absolutely by no means a walk in the park for Russians. So, Gary, what do you think about that? Is it possible that they're going to try and take Kharkiv, or will they flatten it?
Well, anything is possible, but they are flattening it for now. I was just in Kharkiv. I spent some time there and visited troops. It is tough. They're destroying that beautiful city. Remind you that during World War II, Kharkiv changed hands 6 times between the Soviets and the Russians, and there was no such destruction as it is now. Completely erasing beautiful things. There's one of the rarest zoos in Kharkiv, which is really sad to watch. And the Russians, yes, I think they might. There is a very good possibility, because they're turning to use certain weapons that are breaking the front, they're breaking the defenses. They're called COBs, controlled air bombs that they're throwing from their airplanes from far away, and they're able to flatten the cities that way, and they're able to break the defense lines. And it is very difficult for Ukrainians to defend them unless Ukraine is going to get the F-16s on time, which will scare the Russian airplanes off, or get enough Patriot missiles, but it's also very dangerous because they may lose them as well. But that's war. We got to take that risk. Otherwise, they're going to be just escalating and escalating. Russians are turning the fire under us, under the Ukrainians. So we need to keep the pressure up and to make sure that the Ukrainians have enough weapons to defend themselves, at least.
Certainly. Now, Gary, I'm glad you brought up the situation about these glide bombs, because as it's been recorded this year, they have been used in the most significant number. I think around 3,000 to 4,000 of them have been dropped on Ukrainian positions just this year alone, which far outnumbers the missiles and drones that are launched against Ukrainian territory. And I've also seen that there's not enough information about this in the media, that it's very difficult to defend against a glide bomb because it doesn't have a heat signature. So therefore, to shoot it down using traditional air defense, well, it's really difficult to say the least.
Because they're cheap. and it's not. You can't compete with that. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but also they're getting bigger and bigger. They're up to 3 tons, I believe, already.
Yeah, and they create. I mean, they really pack a punch. Now, Ben, concerning this worrying development, is this potentially the way that Russia is going to go? Instead of relying on expensive missiles and as many Iranian drones as it had, are glide bombs going to be a major problem for Ukraine this year?
Look, I think they already are a major problem for Ukraine for the reasons you pointed out, right? The lack of heat signature, the lack of useful targeting by traditional air defense. It's not impossible to defend against, but it is certainly difficult. But I think this goes back to the broader issue at hand, which is we're not only not supplying the weapons in time for Ukraine to defend itself, we're not taking the other side of the equation into account as quickly and as vociferously as we need, and that is on the sanctions and technology export control side. We can sanction and technology export control and make these sort of announcements to our heart's content, but until we enforce them in a way that is making sure that we interrupt the supply chains that Russia needs to make basic weapons, cobbled together weapons and or advanced weapon systems, we're not going to be able to have that impact on the battlefield that the Ukrainians desperately need us to help out with. And part of that means we need to hire more sanctions targeting experts for governments in the United States, across Europe. We are looking at these sanctions and technology export controls tools as, kind of in an older fashioned use of the term, which was kind of economic statecraft. But in this case, we actually have the ability to have a direct impact on the sort of incoming weaponry that Russia can field, both by limiting its means of paying other countries to flout sanctions and move around these sort of restrictions, and also the ability of Russians to actually get the material, the components, the subsystems, the systems that are needed to put these weapons together. So the more we understand and recognize that, for the amount that we spend on one ATACMS missile, we could hire 100 sanctions officers that can really help balance that out. I'm not saying to send any less ATACMS, we should send as many as possible. But the point is, this has a direct correspondence between the military side, that military support we're doing, and our sanctions tools. And it seems like those continue to be divorced in the minds of Western policymakers. These are one and the same, all part of the same system, all part of the same goal, and all part of underlining Western national security. And that starts with supporting Ukraine.
Yes, that's true. And, Secretary Blinken was just recently on a trip to China, and he also said that China needs to stop sending these dual-use items to Ukraine. And if they don't do it, then the U.S. will make sure that they will. We'll leave that as an open question, maybe for next time. Well, gentlemen, Gary Tabach and Benjamin L. Schmidt, thank you very much for joining me on Ukraine this week. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.